just realized really early on that your relationships are what creates the opportunity in your life. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I just knew that if I got enough experience and I met enough people that I could get by, I could make a living. I don't know why, but that clicked in my head of like experience is more important than your qualifications a lot of times. Ultimately, the people you know or your network can determine those opportunities. And then it's up to you to have the skill set or the ability, or if you don't, to develop it if you get the opportunity. I don't want to say afraid, but like my biggest worry, I guess, is like being comfortable and mediocre. And so, yeah, I'm oddly comfortable being uncomfortable. Everybody's waiting for this opportunity or this break or this whatever, but then it's like, you're just sitting there, like you're not doing anything. How is anything supposed to happen? And whether you believe it's God or whatever else, regardless of what you believe, if you're just sitting around, nothing can happen.
Hey guys, welcome back to More Than a Mortgage, a podcast where we have the opportunity to get beyond the numbers of a transaction, to get out of the nitty gritty and to get into the stories of great people. I'm your host, Gavin Sessions. Today I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down with a guy that I met recently, but it's a guy that I admire. He's got a great story that I've heard a little bit of. I'm excited to hear more of it. One of the cool things is I get to learn as you get to learn. So Tanner Helm is my guest today. Great story. Yet another California transplant. There's a little bit of a theme there, but Tanner learned a lot at a young age that I think has really shaped who he is and the decisions that he's made and the journey that he's been on. So buckle up. I promise you're going to really enjoy this story. It's going to resonate with some of you. I'm looking forward to it as well. So join us today. Thanks. Hey, Tanner, welcome, man.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Don't hold the California thing against me.
Definitely not. I skied since I was probably since I didn't make the basketball team as a junior, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of it for me. It's like, okay, I'm going to get a pass and start skiing, got a driver's license and a pass and started skiing a bunch. And that became kind of my go-to.
Nice.
When I wasn't good enough to play JV or varsity basketball. So
yeah, that's awesome.
But and then in college, I was like, okay, I want to try this snowboarding thing out that everybody's trying out. And I was a pretty accomplished skier at that point. So the physics are not all that different, right?
Yeah. I feel like if you are proficient at one, doing both isn't that difficult. Yeah. So self-taught as a snowboarder, took me about a season to feel comfortable,
pretty good.
Yeah.
But man, floating on powder, there's
I used to work up at the mountain in Southern California right out of high school, and I worked park staff, and so we'd get there in the morning and take first laps and make sure everything was groomed after and then there was like I don't know, probably a handful of days because it was Southern California snow, but probably a handful of days where it would start snowing so hard that they're just like, go take laps, basically. Like, like that was the work. Cause they're like, you're not going to maintain, jumps and rails and stuff with how hard it's snowing. So they're like, just go take laps, make sure everybody's okay. And that was a blast. I used to love doing that. So yeah.
Big Bear?
Mountain High.
Mountain High.
Mm-hmm.
Where's Mountain High?
Other side of the valley from Big Bear.
Okay.
Yeah. I grew up, that's another one of like Southern California, but like I grew up snowboarding Big Bear.
Okay.
And that was always like the better mountain,
that was like 10,000 feet, isn't it? At the base area?
I think so. Yeah.
And it has to be because of the location.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know exactly what it's at, but it's decent. And, they seem to get better snow usually than Mountain High because Mountain High's on the other side of the valley, like closer towards LA.
Yeah.
But Mountain High was always known for like the more advanced park features and stuff like that.
Got it.
But yeah, so I worked there for 2 years, I think.
How many days a week?
Like 3 or 4.
So is that a pretty committed drive to get up there and back every day?
Like 40 minutes.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
Apple Valley, Victorville.
Okay.
Yeah. So in between like LA and Vegas, basically.
Got it.
Yeah.
So if somebody was more in call it the LA metro area, how long would it have been a drive for them?
Oh, probably hour and a half, maybe.
So long drive.
Yeah. Pretty long drive.
Okay.
Yeah. But where I was at, you kind of like come up, for us, it was the only way, but like the back way of the mountain and straight into Mountain High.
Oh, nice.
Which was nice. And I usually worked the morning shift. So I'd get there at like 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And, at sunrise, basically. And we'd go, groom all the jumps and stuff. And then just kind of take laps the rest of the day. And it was like, first lap, you'd go stop at like the rails. And then the next lap, you go stop at the boxes. And then you just kind of kept doing that until like 1 o'clock. And then I'd get off, and sometimes I'd ride. Other times I was working at Applebee's at the time too. So other times I'd have to get off at the mountain and drive straight down for like my 3 o'clock shift at Applebee's or whatever.
Go serve up the 2 for $20 or whatever it was.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it was a good time.
What was it like growing up? Because it was probably warm where you lived, right? And then you climbed altitude to get to cold.
Yeah, well, it's the climate we grew up in is high desert, so it's pretty similar to here. Like I think we were probably, I don't know the elevation, probably like 3,500 feet. So hot in the summers, cold in the winters, but we didn't get as much snow.
So more like the Vegas climate then, where it's just
similar to Vegas, just a little more
winter?
mild. Yeah. Yeah, but it got pretty cold, and then not as hot, but definitely like over 100 in the summers. Yeah. So yeah,
cool.
But yeah, it's funny because we like grew up there, and then we moved to Orange County, and then we moved up to Bend, which is also high desert.
That's right,
technically, and then here, similar kind of climate, I guess, more or less. But we definitely get a little more snow here, and definitely in Bend more snow, but similar, similar climates.
Kind of similar where you grew up to where you relocated to where you live now.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Orange County was definitely not similar at all.
No, not at all.
What was, when did you move to Orange County?
We moved to Orange County.
Already married with kids at this point?
Yeah, married with kids.
Okay.
I had been working in title insurance for a few years at the time, and I'm trying to think what year it was. I don't know. Had to be 2014, maybe 2015.
Got it.
And yeah, basically I came home one day in January and told my wife like, hey, we need to get out of the desert pretty much. Like we both grew up there and it was fine and it was comfortable. But for me, it just felt like it was just, and I don't mean to like talk bad about it, but it just felt like a collection of people that had like just kind of given up on, ambition really. Like,
sure.
And so I was just like all the kids were young. I think my oldest was maybe 3 at the time or 4 and, maybe even younger. Anyways, they were toddlers still. And I was like, if we're going to get out, let's get out now. And so I just started like cold calling title companies basically in Orange County and San Diego. And eventually got a job with First American Title down in Orange County. Okay. And for the first like 2 months, I commuted, and then we were able to get an apartment down there, and we moved down to Orange County.
Nice.
So yeah.
So backing up just for a quick minute, just so we can make sure we get the story straight. So you grew up in this hometown. What was it called?
Apple Valley.
Apple Valley. Yeah. Okay. And your wife did as well?
Yeah, she was like, it's kind of like 3 little cities: Hesperia, Apple Valley, and Victorville. She was in Victorville, but it's all kind of the same thing. Yeah.
Nice. And what's her name?
Christy.
Yeah. Nice. So when did you and Christy meet?
We met, it's kind of funny. We go back and forth on when we met because I went to like a small private school in Hesperia, and she went to the public school that was like literally walking distance from us.
Yeah.
And so we were obviously smaller school, but in preseason and stuff, our sports teams would play each other and, whatever. And we had like kind of mutual friend groups all throughout junior high and high school. And, since, being married now and whatnot, we've like went over stories or like parties or whatever, where like we were definitely at the same place, but we never knew each other all through high school, but like mutual friends and kind of similar friend groups. And then we officially met working at Applebee's when we were both 18, I guess. So yeah, the first year out of high school.
Nice.
So yeah, and we were true Hollywood love story, just bussing tables at Applebee's and a year later married.
That's great.
So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you still go to Applebee's?
No, never.
Never.
I feel like we should just for the nostalgia of it, but
you both worked there.
Yeah. That's where we met, bussing tables.
Probably not on the short list of restaurants to go back to.
Definitely not. And we used to, when we lived in Southern California, we used to go visit the Applebee's we met at because a lot of our friends still work there. It was like a really tight knit group of people that worked there.
Yeah.
And all hung outside of work and everything else. But I don't think we've been to Applebee's in 10 years probably.
We have not been to Applebee's in a long time either.
Yeah.
The funny thing is my wife and I, when we visited the Valley here to move, we didn't even know we were moving here.
Yeah.
My parents had moved here like 8 years prior.
Okay.
We made fun of them. I think I've shared this story with you, like very respectfully, but like Idaho. Come on, guys, why are you moving to Idaho? Where's that? Right. And it was next door I grew up in Washington, but it was funny. Within 24 hours of being here, we were looking at real estate on our phones,
That's
right?
too
Like,
funny.
the hooks were getting set pretty quick
Sure.
and pretty deep. And we, I think we either borrowed bikes from my parents or we brought our own bikes. I don't remember specifically. We were visiting. We were staying with my parents and we went for a bike ride. We ended up at Applebee's just
There you
over
go.
by the village.
Okay, yeah.
And it was at that Applebee's in 2016, the summer of 16, that we're like, well, we're moving here.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
What was the like deciding factor? You just fell in love with it when you got here, or was there something that was like, this has to be it?
I mean, moving towards family, I think
Sure.
certainly helps, right? We didn't want to necessarily follow my parents, but it was kind of cool. God had just kind of given us some bookends. It just kind of felt like some of the things that were holding us in the Seattle area were just kind of wrapping up.
Sure.
And so our hearts were soft. And as we drove over here for that week, each city we drove through, in the back of my mind, I was like, I wonder if I could live there. I wonder if I could live here. And then, being near my folks for the week that we were here, and then just really loving almost everything about this place. The Four Seasons are awesome, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just the friendliness that's here, the community that seems to thrive here. It's not perfect, right?
Sure.
And everybody that moves to a new place brings all their problems with them.
Right.
But we were ready. We were ready for a new season, and our hearts were soft. And so it was kind of
awesome.
all of that. And
Yeah.
it was one of those crazy things where like, how do we not even go back?
Yeah.
And it was July of 16.
Oh, wow.
We had lots of life to go back to.
Sure.
So we went back, of course. And then
The trip though wasn't like, the intent wasn't like, oh, we're going to go see about like other shopping in other areas.
It wasn't a relocation, like discovery trip or anything.
Interesting.
It was actually a vacation that we had planned, and I don't remember where we were supposed to go. In 16, maybe we were going to Hawaii. I have no idea. The trip got canceled for some reason.
Oh, okay.
And I was still an employee of a company working for Microsoft, and I was like, well, I already have this scheduled time off.
So I'll just go
So
visit family.
we're like, I guess, we'll go visit my parents. We haven't done that.
That's
in a long
too
time.
funny.
So
That's
the Applebee's.
interesting.
There we go.
Everybody has an Applebee's story.
I guess. Funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys met at Applebee's.
Yep.
Married a year later, it sounds like.
Basically, yeah.
Continued living in your hometown area for several years.
Yeah.
And then you guys had a moment where it was like, we gotta do something different.
Yeah. So we were working at Applebee's when we met, and oddly enough, I was still in a relationship at the time, and my wife was pregnant with our now oldest daughter. At the time was just hers. But yeah, so we met, and then she went on kind of like maternity leave, as serious as that can be from Applebee's, but kind of like, I'm not going to work for a few months.
Yeah.
And during that period, we got coffee and kind of just started dating more or less. Like, it was always just kind of like we were friends, but never really, we were both unavailable, for the first little bit of time. And so, yeah, so we had, we'd gone on a couple dates, and then this is her favorite story to tell. I don't know how good it makes me look, but I think we had gone to coffee and maybe like a movie and dinner or something. Like, we had barely, like maybe one or two dates, if that.
Yeah.
And I had a really good buddy that his fiance lived out in Vegas. And so she was having a birthday party out there. And so I was going to go out there, and he's like, yeah, bring whoever, whatever. So I reached out to my now wife, Christy, and I was like, hey, this is like a real long shot, but do you want to go to Vegas this weekend? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, explained to her like, oh, my buddy, his fiance's having a birthday party or whatever. And yeah, her grandma ended up watching our daughter for the weekend, and basically our like first real time being together was driving out to Vegas for the weekend. And which is like, now I look back, I'm like, it's honestly a pretty good way to get to know somebody. We're like in the car for 3.5 hours, like we knew each other, but not like that, and shared stories the whole time and laughed, and it was a good time. And I came back from that trip pretty much being like, yeah, we're going to get married. Like, this is, I mean, I think my oldest daughter at the time was like 3 months old. So she was, still really young. Yeah. But I think in my head knew like, I either need to be serious about this or not. And so after that weekend, I was like, no, this is it. So yeah, within a year from that time, we got married, and I went from working at Applebee's to I had cold emailed my dad's sold copiers my whole life. And I've always been big about kind of like making my own way, if you will.
Sure.
And so I had emailed his boss, who's the owner of the company. And I said, hey, I don't want this to be a thing that I'm getting a job because of my dad, but I'm getting married and we have a kid and another one on the way. Working these like little part-time jobs isn't working anymore. I need to establish myself in a career. And he said, well, come down for an interview and, we'll see how it goes. And I was like, okay, cool. And
so
it was
this not, your dad didn't know anything about this?
My dad didn't know about it until after I had interviewed. And
Nice.
I just didn't tell him. And for me, like as a 18-year-old kid, I didn't know where to start. And I'm like, my dad has a career there.
Yeah.
So, and it's like at the time, I'm like, this is the only, person I know that I could directly reach out to that could potentially offer me something, other than that, it was like maybe trying to find some like friends' dads that own businesses or, whatever. But I liked the idea of sales. I hadn't ever done really sales at that time. I was only 18. I had worked at like a golf course in the mountain, so.
Right.
So yeah, I went down and interviewed, and I actually had gotten a job at a grocery store that I was supposed to have my first day of work on the day of the interview. So I called the owner of that company the day of my interview, and I said, hey, I want to come down and interview, but I'm also supposed to start my first day of work at a new job. So if I come down, I'm forfeiting my opportunity to go work there. And he was like, that's totally up to you, but if you want to come down and interview, let's do it. And it was like a 45-minute drive, so there was just no way to make it work. So I went down and interviewed. I left the interview, and it was like a tough interview. He wasn't like...
Wasn't a softball.
Yeah, it wasn't a softball, and it definitely wasn't... he was clear that he wasn't going to hire me just because my dad had worked there. And my dad was like one of his first employees. So it's not like it was just like my dad kind of had the job there. He was like very close knit with, all the management and whatnot. But he was clear, like, you're not getting this job because of your dad. And I was like, okay, cool. So I left and, I did all the interview things. Like, when can I expect to hear from you? And if I don't hear from you by then, can I follow up? And on my way home, he called me and said, I don't have a sales job for you, but I have a position where, we can offer you a full-time job. And, it involved a lot of driving. So he's like, we can give you mileage and whatever. And he kind of offered it to me. And I said, sure, I'm happy to start there. So anyways, it was a copier sales like agency, I guess, through Xerox. And I did that for a few months. And then a territory opened up for a sales job and they offered it to me and I took that. So that was my first like step into a career really, was I was like now a copier salesman, which isn't super exciting.
Yeah.
But so I did that for about a year. And then, we had our second kid and I was selling copiers and it was all right. But one of a family friend had reached out who had also previously worked at that company. And he's just like a great guy still. I'm in touch with him today. He's like one of my favorite humans in the world. But he had reached out to me and said, hey, Fidelity Title is hiring sales reps for the high desert, which is where we were living at the time. And I was driving about 45 minutes to an hour down to work in Riverside to sell. That was my territory to sell copiers. And he's like, I don't, if you're interested, I can put you in touch with the managers and, whatever. And I had no idea. Like, I didn't know anything about real estate or title insurance or anything. I just knew that this guy had gone from selling copiers to in title insurance. And he was like relatively successful at that. And, still now he owned a Remax franchise for a little bit and has been in the real estate space forever now. And so I'm like, I don't know anything about title, but sure. And their office was in our same office building. So I went and got lunch with their managers one day and they offered me the position there at Fidelity Title. And that was kind of my like intro into real estate basically. And it was perfect timing because Fidelity was in the process of transitioning all their sales reps from the glory days of title where it was just like golf trips and fancy dinners and, box seats to sporting events to like, okay, you actually have to be a salesperson because of all the RESPA stuff going on. And so they were like literally doing a clean sweep of a lot of their sales force because they're like, if you don't know how to sell, you're not valuable to us anymore because you've built your business off of just like buying, agents referrals. And Xerox was known at the time for like being very traditional sales. Like when I got hired on to have the sales territory, They like sent me to a big office for like 3 days of sales training, and it was very old school, like sell me this pen and objection handling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I had gotten like a very formal sales training, which was cool. So I did that, got into title insurance, and just kind of a fluke, but I was like, cool. And then, I worked up in the high desert for a few years, I think about 2 years. And that's when I was like, okay, we got to get out of here. And then, stayed in the title world, but went from Fidelity to First American. And so we moved down to Orange County, and I was doing title insurance with First American. And I had kind of gotten, I don't want to say like made a name for myself, but I had kind of gotten a reputation of the way I was bringing value to real estate agents was I was helping them grow their business, because you can't really sell title insurance, right? It's just relationship based.
Right.
In California, all the fees are regulated, so it's like, there's not like any way to really sell your product. You just have to go build relationships. And so I had kind of built up a reputation for, at the time, like whatever it was, it would have been like 2012, 2013, was like helping agents use Facebook and do video. Like I used to do like whole trainings on how to do video and stuff, because that was like a relatively new concept at the time.
Yeah.
So I'd built up this kind of reputation for helping agents grow their business, kind of in the marketing avenue. And then my biggest thing was either save you time, save you money, or grow your business. Like that's how I was going to bring value to you. So a lot of the time and money saving stuff was technology based. So it was, I'd go out and build relationships with owners of a CRM system or, whatever tech stuff was going on at the time. And then I'd basically just go sell their product to real estate agents and say, you're using these 3 products and this one does the same thing. And so I'd kind of like introduce them to new technology and things like that. And that opened up an opportunity with a company called West, which was a division of WFG Title. And it was kind of their technology and marketing division. So so I did that. And that was kind of my real transition into like loving real estate, I think, at that time. So that was down in Orange County, and I was handling from San Diego all the way up to like the Central Coast, San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
And my job was basically to support the WFG sales reps by going out and doing like marketing training and, one-on-one meetings and stuff like that with the sales reps agents. So it was kind of WFG's way of bringing in value that was compliant, but we were able to come in and talk about marketing or talk about a product without it being, gray area in terms of compliance. And that was still to this day, like one of the best jobs I've ever had. It was like leadership was incredible. I'm still in touch with like, the people that ran that division. And I think I developed more in that year or two, probably professionally, than I ever have. And during that time, I was so hands-on with real estate agents that it made me fall in love with like the real estate industry as a whole. Prior to that, it was just kind of like, this is the industry I'm in that I can earn a living,
Yeah.
Whether it was title insurance or marketing or whatever, I was like, I can, this is okay, So, but there was never any like, I love real estate so much, that's what I want to do type of thing. So
That wasn't a thing when you were a kid. I want to grow up and be a real estate agent.
No, I didn't. I feel like outside of like what every 8-year-old kid, like a professional baseball player or something like that, I never really had a, this is what I want to do moment. I knew really early on, like I graduated, early June. And by the end of that month, I had 3 jobs, and all 3 of those jobs I got from people that I knew, or like my good buddy in high school, his dad was the manager at Applebee's. So I got that job. And then one of our teachers worked at the Parks and Rec district, which oversaw the golf course. And so I went and worked at the golf course. And so there was things like that where it was like, I just realized really early on that your relationships are what creates the opportunity in your life, I guess. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I just knew that if I got enough experience and I met enough people that I could get by, I could make a living. And so, that's what I did. I had plans that year to go to school and play golf. And I was going to do that with a couple of buddies that we all played high school golf together. We were going to go to the local community college and be on the golf team. And it was a whole big plan. And I worked 3 jobs that whole summer, and the school year started, and I think I did probably 3 weeks of community college. And then I was like, this isn't going to work for me. So dropped out of school and just started working.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dude, what a cool story. And you already kind of mic dropped it for us. I was going to say, have you ever, looked back at that story and traced it all the way back to the beginning and kind of thought, hey, how did this come together and who gets the credit
Yeah.
for one thing leading to the next thing to the next thing?
Yeah.
And it was really cool how, at least what I'm hearing, all the best business books basically say what you're saying, which is, hey, leverage your network. Who do you know that could help you get this job or that job? Or, I mean, because it copy sales probably wasn't something you ever thought you would do.
No.
But it was, hey, I respect this guy who owns a company. My dad's benefited from, being an employee at this company for, I don't know, I assume a long time.
A long time. Yeah. I mean, 30 plus years.
And you
now.
just took the initiative, right? So who gets the credit for helping instill that in you?
I think my dad, I don't know. I attribute most of my positive qualities to my dad. But I don't know. I mean, he definitely was the one that like instilled hard work and, kind of that ambition and that drive. He was obviously in sales my whole life. And when I was younger, it probably wasn't until later, like as a young adult, that I realized, what was going on. And now I've kind of put the pieces together. But as I was younger, I knew like we always did fine financially. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were never struggling, and for the most part, like if I wanted new sports gear, we got that, or, we traveled occasionally, or like my mom had horses. So I was like, that obviously isn't cheap, like could piece that together. So I knew my dad did okay. And I also understood that it was sales. So his income was based on his performance, which I knew at a young age, basically. And not, like I said, like not the details of like commission and all that stuff, but I knew like he's getting paid in direct proportion to how well he's doing his job. And it's not just like you're capped at a set. And I always liked that idea. And then, I think I remember very clearly being in junior high and I'd gotten a report card or maybe it was just a test grade, but I'd taken it home and I'd gotten a C. And in my head, I had planned out, I don't know, my mind's always worked kind of funny where I process in dialogue, so like I think through a conversation before I have it a lot of times and think about different ways to say things or whatever. So in my head, I had planned out this whole thing about how a C is average. So the grade's okay if I got a C because it's average. And, I can do better, but I'm not failing. I'm not, it's not a bad grade. It's just not a good grade. And so I'd taken the report card home to my dad and, he's of course was like, what's the deal with this C? And I'm like, oh, well, C's average, whatever. And I remember, I don't know why it like stuck with me for so long, but he was never angry or yelled, but he was always very firm. And I think one of the things I picked up from him without knowing at the time is that like the way you say things matters. And he said, in this house, we're not average. We don't do anything average. Look at our home in general. That's not average. That's above average. Look at our performance and things. That's not average. Like, so we don't like in this home, we're not average. And I remember that was like kind of that was the first time where it felt like there was like a standard set where it was like, we're going to overachieve and we're going to work hard. And we're also not going to accept results if we know we didn't put in the effort, if we, like you could put in minimal effort and you get whatever the result is. But that's not okay. If you know that you could have put in more, then let's put in more. And we grew up playing sports and stuff. So I think some of that was instilled in sports as well. But a lot of it was just a very kind of personal accountability side of life where it was like you're responsible for your outcomes and your effort dictates those outcomes. And so I think that's I carried that on for a really long time. And whether it was, connecting with people or reaching out or, whatever, I don't know necessarily where that mindset came from, but I do remember telling people like the summer I was working or as I was trying to convince people that it was okay for me to quit school, I remember telling them like, nobody wants a degree on a paper. Like I'd rather go somewhere and tell them that I'm an expert at doing this job. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I'm like, wouldn't you rather hire somebody that says, hey, I've been doing this for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years and I've been doing it successfully versus somebody that says, hey, I just graduated college and I got this paper that says I know what I'm doing, you know? And so I remember like, I don't know why, but that clicked in my head of like experience is more important than your qualifications a lot of times. And, ultimately the people you know, or your network can determine those opportunities. And then it's up to you to have the skill set or the ability, or if you don't, to develop it if you get the opportunity, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I love what you're saying. It takes some people lifetimes to learn that or not learn it, right? And a lot of folks are chasing that type of wisdom in books or wherever they can gobble it up. But it seemed like you had the benefit of having it instilled in you and in a young age. And then you actually did something with it. Yeah. Which was cool.
Yeah.
So
I know, like I said, I know from a young age, and definitely as I got into my adult life, there's always been, and I still, my kids probably get sick of hearing it, but I always am like looking at situations and figuring out what we could have done differently, like what's in our control. And whether it's 1% of the situation or 99% of the situation, something was in your control, even if it's just how you responded to it or how you prepared for it or whatever, you know, like I've always been like, where can I find what I could have changed versus like just being a victim to whatever the outcome is, you know?
Yeah. Totally random. Are you an Enneagram guy? Do you know what your Enneagram is?
I've done them before for jobs and stuff, but I don't know what mine is, like off the top of my head.
Got it.
Yeah. I've done like the personality stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, for jobs mostly, but I never. Yeah.
Not like leaned into that.
No, not a ton. It interests me a lot.
Yeah.
And especially now as like in a little bit more of like a leadership role, it's interesting because I am curious like what motivates people and stuff like that. But yeah, I've never like really dove into it for myself.
Yeah, there's some cool psychology in it.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the behind the scenes more of it as well from a categorization type of standpoint. I think it's fascinating to kind of to know, okay, these are my tendencies or these are my strengths or weaknesses. So that's why I brought it up. But, I'm reading a really great book right now that I would recommend. I'm not done with it. I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but it's called Give and Take.
Yeah, I think you did.
It's by a guy named Adam Grant, I think. So anyway, great book recommended to me. I never read a book without somebody recommending it to me.
Yeah.
But, and by read, I mean, I'm listening to it. So, but it's fascinating because it basically, there's a reciprocity, model that this author says that all humans fall into. They're either givers, they're takers, or they're givers, takers, or in the middle as matchers. We don't have to get into this right now, but it's just cool, I think, to think about, all right, where do I, or where do you, or where does somebody fall on a spectrum of some sort of a measurement, and not to define your person as your identity by any means, but just, I think, to enlighten you from a self-awareness standpoint on where you're strong, where you're weak, where you can improve. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. It's super interesting. I'll definitely read it. I'm very into, whether it's like business or whatever. I don't like self-help, but you know what I'm saying? Like that type of development type reading and podcasts and things like that. So
sweet.
I'll definitely check it out.
Nice. So, okay. You kind of networked yourself into the title and escrow industry. And that led you to Orange County for a season of life, right? What was it like living in Orange County? You hadn't lived there before.
No, we hadn't lived there before. We'd spent a lot of time. That was like a pretty common thing to do growing up, especially once everybody got their driver's license stuff, where it was like, oh, we're, going to the beach, because it was only about an hour and a half from us.
Yeah.
So we'd spent a lot of time down there, but yeah, we moved down there, and while we were there, it felt like hell. But we look back now, and those are some of our like most cherished times as a family. That's for sure. But I mean, it's just so stressful, right? Like cost of living goes up a ton. There's definitely the keeping up with the Joneses type, atmosphere in the air. But yeah, it was a very hectic time for sure. I was working a ton. Like I said, I was covering from San Diego all the way up to Central Coast in California. So there was, 6-7 hour, round trip drives. Dang. I was trying to avoid that.
It's all right. It's for the kids.
My kid would be proud. Yeah. 7 or 8 hour drives. No, but it was a lot of time in the car. That's honestly when, like I mentioned before, like how part of why I developed so much that year was because I would listen to audiobooks while I was in the car and podcasts. And I probably listened to 50 plus audiobooks that year and multiple times over. But it was hectic. It was long days. I was earning a decent living, but in Orange County, that's all relative. So, it was the 5 of us in a little 2 or 3 bedroom apartment for most of that time. My wife was working part-time, so it was a lot of like, I'm getting home and she's leaving for work, and, the kids ate dinner or they didn't eat dinner, whatever. And our kids were all 5 and under at the time. So it was, like I said, it was very hectic. But when we look back at those years, there's some special times of, I think, just really figuring it out for the first time, because when we were in the desert, we had a lot of help with family. Cost of living was really minimal. It was relatively comfortable. We had grown up there, so there wasn't a lot of like figuring anything out. It was like, we kind of got it. And then moving down to Orange County was like, okay, we're in a new area. We have to figure out just like the day-to-day life stuff, but then also kind of living on our own and, not having the help nearby. And we were navigating a bunch of other stuff at the time with my oldest daughter's biological dad. And so there was like a lot going on with that as well. But yeah, it was a crazy few years. It was, like I said, like in the middle of it, it felt the worst, but now I'm like so thankful for those times. Yeah, it was a ton of development. We were still young too. So it was like a lot of figuring out stuff with our marriage and, all that stuff too, in the middle of like the highest stress situations. For me professionally, it was some of the best times in terms of, growing that network that like we talked about. Like I was, working with some incredible agents and just business people. I had kind of started a side, like calling it a marketing agency is too aggressive, but like kind of helping consulting, if you will, like other small business owners with marketing. And so that connected me with some incredible people that, I still am in touch with today. And so that was really cool professionally, because I think moving in the desert, everything was so condensed and like everybody kind of knew everybody. And then I realized like Orange County and, then working in LA and San Diego, it was like everybody still knows everybody, but the people they know are a lot different, like there's different access here. And so, that was a cool time for me to kind of explore, different networks and, trying to find my place. I was 21, 22, maybe, at the time. And so, still trying to navigate.
Super young.
Yeah. Being
Most
a
people
young
are still in college.
professional. Yeah, exactly. So there was a little bit of that too. And a little bit of a chip on my shoulder of like, I was a young kid trying to, play in the big leagues, if you will, of Orange County real estate. And, yeah, so it was interesting. It was an interesting time, but I met some amazing people and, professionally grew a ton during those years.
That's awesome.
So
you don't live there currently.
Yeah.
So something led you guys away. What was the?
Yeah, we had some friends that moved up to Bend, Oregon, and when our kids were real little, probably 4, my oldest was 4, so we had 4, 3, and 2, maybe even younger, honestly. But we started doing a Christmas trip up to Bend, and so because obviously in Orange County, you don't get a lot of Christmas weather or festivities. So we would leave on the night of Christmas Eve usually, and we'd drive through the night because we had 3 toddlers. So, they'd fall asleep and we'd just blitz it through the night, the 12, 13-hour drive up to Bend. And we'd get there Christmas morning at about 5 or 6 a.m. and our friends would have coffee made and, everything. I think one of the years we had sent presents up there. So our kids did Christmas there. But yeah, so we started doing that Christmas trip and we did that like 2 or 3 years in a row. And just being up in Bend, it's, kind of similar to like how you guys were here. Like we just love the town and, what we did there, but we had only visited in the winter. And so after a few years, our friends kind of convinced us, they're like, if you love it here in the winter, like you got to come up in the summer and, whatever. So the following year we had come up for like, I don't know, there was a music festival in the summer or something like that. And we'd come up for that. And then we had met some other friends from visiting so frequently that, somebody was having a wedding and we came up for that. And I think it got to a point where we had, the year before we moved to Bend, we had vacationed up to Bend like 6 or 7 times that year.
Again, 6 or 7. That's the theme of today.
I told myself I wasn't going to do this. No, I'm just kidding. But I love that you recognize it right away. It tells me you have teenagers.
Well, it's just because I have kids. They're always doing it.
Yeah, it's still like not fully registered for me. But yeah, so we had visited Bend frequently the year prior and, I kind of was just like, we when we moved down to Orange County, we had moved away from family, and obviously not as drastic. It was only like an hour and a half away, but we had already kind of like detached a little bit from family in terms of like them being part of our day-to-day lives. So moving to Bend didn't seem that crazy at that time, because it's not like, oh, like, you know, our parents are right down the street and we see them all the time or anything like that. So yeah, we just decided to move. Basically, that was it. We kind of, after visiting so much, we're like, are we going to do this? And it was like, yeah, I don't see why not. And I had, so I had transitioned out of title already and gotten into real estate in Southern California.
Okay.
That's probably an important thing to mention, because I kind of skipped over it a little bit. But I remember the moment I decided to get into real estate. I had been doing marketing for real estate agents for a long time, and we were running social media ads and things like that. And I was in the car on the way home from San Luis Obispo. So I'd been in the car for like 4 hours. I still have like 2 hours of traffic to sit in. And an agent from San Diego calls me. I know, it's the worst. I spent more time in that car. That's a funny story too. But this agent from San Diego calls me and he's like, hey man, I just took like a $1.6 million listing off of the Facebook ads we were running. And I had like just started the ads the week prior. And so I'm thinking, oh, you got a lead. So I'm like, oh, nice. You got your lead. Like, did you contact them? And he's like, no, the lead came in the other day and I just went and met with them. They signed the listing agreement, like $1.6 million listing agreement off the Facebook ad I ran.
Yeah.
And I'm like that. And the guy was paying me like $400 a month for marketing consulting, you know? And I'm like, you just took a $1.6 million listing. So I was like, that's awesome, man. Congrats, you know, whatever. And so I get off the phone with him and I like pretty much immediately call my wife and I'm like, hey, I'm going to sell real estate. I think like this is, you know, like I'm working with hundreds, if not thousands of agents across the country. They're all telling me that the hardest part of the business is what I'm doing well.
You're teaching them how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm helping agents grow their business on like, and at this point it had been at scale. Like I was working with a lot of agents on a monthly basis, helping them grow their business. And, you know, I had all types of stats and everything. Like at the time, agents that were working with me on their marketing were doing an additional 7 deals a year just from what we were doing alone.
That's very significant.
So it was like pretty, you know, it's not nothing, you know, it was like a pretty good chunk of business.
Yeah.
And so I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to get into real estate. And I was like, I think it just makes more sense, whatever. So, and that was like really, that was it. That was when I decided like selling real estate was going to be my path, or like at least for that time period. And it didn't make sense right at that moment financially for us. Like I was still doing well at my job and everything else. So I actually had my wife get her license. And I was like, if you get licensed, then I can generate business for you and then you can kind of close it out. And that would be a good transition. It ended up not working as well as I had planned. So she got licensed and I remember we did like a buyer consultation and she was like, this is the worst. I hate it.
It wasn't for her.
It wasn't for her. And which is totally fine. Like I was trying to, you know, have my cake and eat it too, kind of. So I got licensed and I left my job at West, and that was very hard to leave because one, the income, and two, the people were incredible. And then, another little like just kind of personal network move that worked really well was I'd been very close with an independent broker in Southern California, and he was looking to open an Orange County division or branch of his brokerage. He was up in the high desert at the time, and they were opening up in Palm Springs as well. And so he was like, yeah, I'm looking for somebody to run Orange County. And I was like, perfect. I'm going to have a team. And I had no plans of having a team at the time. I was just like, I'm going to, sure, I'll have an Orange County team. So we opened that branch for him in Orange County. And like I said, it was just an independent brokerage, but we were kind of representing the Orange County side. And I quickly brought on board a good friend of mine who I had, chased down for title business for a long time in Orange County. And that's how we originally met. And he had had a bunch of personal stuff going on. He had kind of gotten out of real estate, but we just always were, somewhat connected. Yeah. And he was telling me that he was thinking about getting into real estate. And I'm like, hey, I'm starting a team. So what a coincidence, And again, like no idea what I was really doing, but it worked out. He came on board and we started a team in Southern California. That would have been 2016. And we ran it for a year and probably in an office about as big as this, like a little executive suite. Nice. We had no idea what we were doing. And I think if I remember, I wish I could go back and find, I have it somewhere, our actual production that year. And there's a little debate between the two of us of if we sold nothing at all, or I seem to remember selling 14 homes that year.
That's a big swing.
Two of us.
Big spectrum.
I mean, when I say nothing at all, it's him being a little sarcastic.
Got it.
I mean, we definitely sold a handful of houses,
Okay.
but we scrambled to get them. Like it was not what I had pictured at all in terms of like, oh, I'm just going to go, do all this marketing and get all these leads and whatever. It was like, a wholesaler couldn't sell a deal. So we would make relationships with them and then we'd pair them with an investor. And then when the investor remodeled, we'd list it. And then, friends of friends that we were like kind of chasing down. And, but anyways, regardless of how much production we did that year, we made it by. We didn't do great, but we made it by.
Proves the point that it's actually a really hard job, right? Even if you're a great marketer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing about marketing is you have to have a budget to market, which I didn't, so that's like the other side of it was like, we were trying to scramble. And in my head, like, I'm always like aggressively optimistic with my business plans usually.
Yeah. The glass is more than half full.
Yeah. And so in my head, I'm like, yeah, we'll just like get a couple quick deals and then we'll put some of that in the marketing budget and whatever. And then I'm like, okay, this didn't work out at all, but we made it by that year. And at the end of that first year was when we decided to move to Bend, basically.
Yeah.
So my business partner, who is still a really good friend, I was talking to him on the way in today. He's in Houston, Texas now, but he had an opportunity with another real estate company down in Southern California. So it kind of worked out decent where, originally I was like, I'll move, but I'll still kind of do business down here, which never works. And so it just ended up working out. We kind of, not parted ways. It was all, totally fine. But I moved up to Bend and with the intent of selling real estate up there, basically, but no real runway to do that. We had rented a house sight unseen. Again, I guess there's a common thread here. I started reaching out to independent brokerages up in Bend. I just like anybody that wasn't like a big, franchise or brand reached out, and I had made this whole package of who I was and what I could do with their brokerage.
Kind of like a portfolio?
Yeah, portfolio and just like kind of like case studies of agents I had worked with and whatever. And so more or less what I did was I got in touch with these brokers in Oregon, and because I knew my goal was to sell real estate and live in Bend. Those were like the two things I knew. But I also knew like I need an income while we're moving and everything else. And it's going to take some time. I wasn't even licensed in Oregon yet. So I'm like, it's going to take some time to get licensed and generate clients and everything else. So essentially what I did was I sold this brokerage on this idea that I would come in and be their company coach, essentially. Like I'd come in and I'd work with their agents, and they had, I forget, I think 100 or 120 agents at the time. So a decent sized brokerage, but they were still just independently owned. And, started breaking down all the math. You have X amount of agents that do this much. And if each agent that works with me does this additional business, and, they ran a cap model. So I'm like, if I can get an extra 10 agents to cap, it's this much income back to you and, whatever. And I kind of broken it all down for them, and they were nice enough to offer me a job to do that. And so I had a small salary and some incentive, and it was enough for us to say, okay, let's move.
That's cool.
So we rented a house sight unseen. Our friends from Bend actually kind of went over and just were like, yeah, it's all legit. And so I moved up June of 2017 to Bend. And then my wife came up about a month later because I moved up just to kind of start work and get situated. And then by 2018, I guess it would have been, I was licensed in Bend and selling.
Nice.
So yeah, that was kind of the transition up to Bend, more or less. It was
about
hard.
A 6-month window there.
Yeah. But 6 months to a year, I think, before I was like fully selling. Because what ended up happening is as I started selling, the brokerage was like, well, we don't want to pay you to be our, company coach, more or less, and also sell real estate, which is fair. So we kind of parted ways there, and I got into selling real estate.
So it was a good kind of on-ramp for you to Bend, basically, and you knew you wanted to be actually selling, not just coaching.
Yeah, and I had been transparent with them about that. I think, but also, regardless of how transparent you are, sometimes as things play out, it's like, okay, this isn't going to work, and so I think that's kind of what happened. And I was okay with it. It was a little frustrating at the time because, obviously, anytime you get a salary pulled out from under you, you're like, okay, well, now it's all up to me,
Exactly.
But yeah, it ended up working good, and got into Bend, Oregon real estate in I think 2018. So
nice.
Yeah.
You ever run into a guy named Sam DeLay?
Mm-hmm. I know Sam.
Do you know Sam?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We'll take that offline. He's a good dude.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
I met him at Mars Hill back in the day in Seattle.
Nice. That's too funny.
Yeah, so we're still connected.
Yeah.
Today, but he's a great guy.
I can't say I know him well, but I know him, and we've interacted several times. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, that name just popped to mind. But
Yeah. No, that's funny.
Sweet. Okay. So you guys did what a lot of people want to do, which is relocate to a new state, not sure what we're going to do for income.
Mm-hmm.
You've made a plan. You made a plan. You're able to lean back on your experience that of your success from, and actually that turned into something that you could propose. And obviously a brokerage was attracted to. So you found yourself a job, which was awesome. That's often, as a mortgage broker, we always hear people, oh yeah, I want to move to Boise or wherever it is they want to move to. It's like, okay, what are you going to do for work? Well, I don't know yet. Right.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get a mortgage, turns out, if you don't have an income.
Yeah.
But when folks want to get to a place, I think it's cool that if they want to be somewhere bad enough, they'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
They rent a house, they create some sort of job, they come and get established, and then it'll usually work out, right? It depends what someone's drive looks like, right?
Yeah. And your tolerance for it not working out along the way, you know, like
exactly.
that. Like I said, I'm always like painfully optimistic with this stuff. And so for me, I'm always like, what's the goal? And then kind of like how we get there is all up in the air, you know, and it doesn't really, for me, it's all just kind of details, you know, like it's I've always been I'll figure it out kind of guy.
Yep.
And that's what the move to Bend was really. It was like, we knew we loved Bend and we knew we wanted to live up there. I knew that somehow, I could kind of more or less manufacture a job there while I got my real estate business up and running. And yeah, that's what we did. And like I said, it was definitely hard. It wasn't like it was like all easy breezy. And, we moved, it was great. Yeah, it was hard. My wife flew up to cause I had driven the cars up and moved most of our stuff. So when she flew up, she flew into Portland, and like the 2.5 hour drive from Portland to Bend, when we were like officially we're moved in now. She pretty much cried the whole way over, just like, what are we doing? Like, she hadn't even seen the house yet. Like it was
anybody that would fly into Portland is going to be in tears.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's
still cry flying into Portland.
Rude awakening.
Yeah, but yeah, and then I don't know. We just kind of made it work. Like I said, I just think that that's more or less kind of the common theme of my story throughout the years is just like, I know where I want to go, and then sort of figure out how to get there as I do it, and get punched in the teeth while we do it and keep moving, and that's it.
Yeah, I follow a couple guys. One of them sat in that chair, but there's another guy that has been super clear with me. He's similarly is, hey, I know where I want to be, or I know what my end goal is. And then my question is like, well, then how do you figure out how to get there? And he's like, well, it's easy. I just work backwards.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's cool. Is that I don't think that's a strength of mine to work backwards necessarily. Is that something you've ever employed that strategy? Is that something that you'd say you're good at?
To some extent, because like I've definitely heard people talk about like reverse engineering stuff, and I wish I could say I was like that methodical and planned out. I tend to live by a motto that we kind of adopted the year we started the real estate team in Southern California, me and my partner, and it was move fast, break shit. And that's kind of that's kind of how I live without knowing it at the time. But like I said, we kind of adopted that motto. And so that's kind of how I am. Like I do try to reverse engineer sometimes, but everything obviously doesn't always go to plan. And so I think for me, more so than like working backwards from the goal and getting there, it's just been like, just keep moving. And then if you hit a wall or something doesn't work out, then like pivot and move again. And as long as you're moving, like you'll kind of figure it out, and you'll figure out, sometimes things work, sometimes don't. Sometimes you meet somebody that can take you 4 steps ahead, whatever it may be. But I think for me, like I've always been, I don't want to say afraid, but like my biggest worry, I guess, is like being comfortable and mediocre. And so I, almost to a fault, I think in a lot of ways is like I force myself into discomfort constantly, and whether that's career, whether that's physically, whatever it may be, like getting comfortable scares me because I feel like that's where like, it just feels like that's where you go to die when you're comfortable, Yeah. And so, I'm oddly comfortable being uncomfortable. And so, I think, like I said, if I decide where I want to go, then I just kind of figure it out. And I just try to stay in motion, and I think there is some type of working backwards from the goal. But more so than that, I think it's just keep moving and, sort of figure it out. Like almost like you're, whatever, going through a maze or something. And it's like you're watching a mouse go through a maze and he hits a wall. And so he just turns around and makes a couple different turns and hits another wall. And just, I feel like that's kind of how I am, is like, as long as I'm in motion, then the rest of it kind of works itself out.
You might get a few headaches hitting the wall here and there, right?
A lot of headaches for sure.
Yeah. I'm more like that as well. I can resonate with that as well. I want to be more, this is not me picking on you, me, or anybody that thinks like we do. I want to be more methodical, thoughtful. I want to be able to reverse engineer better and make a plan and then try to execute it.
Yeah.
But we're not all wired that way, right? And that's okay. And
I think my issue with it is if I get too deep in the details, I stop moving, and so like if I were to try to reverse engineer stuff completely, like even now, like I've got big plans for the next couple of years. If I try to break it down into all these little baby steps, that will for sure get me there, like no doubt.
Yeah.
But then I just end up overanalyzing all those little steps and then what happens at this step and, whatever. And so I think for me, there's like a sweet spot between strategy and action. And I probably err more on the side of action, but there is some strategy to it for sure. I just have found, like, for me personally, if I get too deep in the details, then it stops me from doing anything.
Yeah.
But I definitely could have saved myself a lot of headaches if I was a little more methodical about things.
Yeah. And I think that's a good observation. I'm very, very similar. I think of old people and why are they where they're at? A lot of times as people age, they just stop moving as much, right? And they're not as active and their muscles atrophy.
Yep.
Again, I'm not necessarily that old yet. And I look, maybe fast forward 40 years, if I make it that long, and maybe I'll have a different point of view, but it does seem like inactivity will lead to a slowing down, which will ultimately lead to, I don't know. One of my really good buddies, his name's Bo, his grandpa just passed away earlier this year. He was 90 years old.
Wow.
He golfed 4 days a week. He was a healthy guy. He played golf, the day before he died. He woke up that day, took a shower, was planning to go play golf again, never made it out of the shower.
Wow.
Like, that's kind of a cool way to go, if you ask me. Like,
Yeah.
This guy did what he loved all the way until the very last day. And not all of us are going to be able to have that story, right? Sometimes we're going to get sick and it is what it is. But that is a cool,
I like that.
That's a cool goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard or read a thing, and I don't know how true it is. So, take it with a grain of salt, but there was some like crazy statistic about mail carriers in particular and how quickly they typically die after they retire.
Like post office
people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and I don't know if this is like an older stat where it was more like on, they were on foot rather than walking, driving around in vans.
Yeah.
But, and again, I don't know how true it is, so it could all be irrelevant, but the concept was basically like, they get old and they retire. And then like shortly after that, within like a year or two, a lot of them pass away. And the idea was because they just stopped moving.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So
it's probably,
true. Or maybe I just made
true.
it up. I don't know.
You ever heard
Sounds
of
good.
Ever heard of Jeff Bezos?
Yeah.
Yeah. He owns Amazon. He did all right.
I know that guy. Heard of him.
I'm going to botch. I don't know that I ever saw this quote written down, but I remember hearing it in the various companies I've worked for over the years. He's like, fail fast. In other words, we're going to try things and we're going to be okay that some of them aren't going to work, but we need to quickly identify that they were a failure and we're going to pivot, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of maybe a little bit of your strategy of, well, we're going to try something and we're going to keep moving and we're going to bang our head and bump our head, but eventually we're going to pivot and get it right.
Yeah, I think so. I've never been really afraid to fail. And I don't say that like in a cocky way. I'm just saying like, cause trust me, I've had plenty of failures, but I think like for me, I just have always been like, it's never stopped me from getting to the goal really.
Yep.
And, that's just kind of how I look at it, is like, even whatever the pain of failure is, like we've always gotten through it. Like whether it's personal, business, financial, whatever, like we always just end up getting through it. And so what's there to be afraid of, to try something that fails, or even if it's just a strategy rather than like, outside of like a whole business. Like I've had businesses that fail. I've had, strategies that fail, whatever. And I'm just like, you just always just, like I said, if you just keep moving, then you're fine. Like it's not even really a failure. And there's still small wins inside of those failures, So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've always kind of had that approach to things. And I've never resonated with like my buddies that have like, more traditional conservative type mindsets towards careers, or even like, I remember like one of the biggest arguments I got in with one of my friends was, he's like, he made a comment after we had moved to Oregon. I'd posted something about the river or whatever. And he's like, I wish we could move up. And I'm like, do it. You could move up.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, the job and blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I had a job too. Like I can, we had family too. Like if you want to do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
You just have to decide what it's going to cost,
right.
and, both like in sacrifice and expenses and everything else. And then just do it, like, I feel like that's always kind of been my mindset. It's like, don't. And again, this is probably another thing that came from my dad. There used to be a running joke where he would say, don't tell me you want something unless you actually want it, because I'll make it happen. And that, I feel like I kind of have that same mindset of like, if you're not willing to do what you're saying you want to do, then you don't actually want it. So why are you even talking about it?
Yeah.
And that, not communicated well, that comes out a little harsh, I think, sometimes. But I think it's just true. Like, what do we gain from talking about what we want to do if we're not just going to go do it? Otherwise you're just making yourself feel good by saying, oh, I'd love to do this, or I'd love to do this, or go on this vacation, or do this business. But it's like, then try it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to work. It's okay if it doesn't, but at least try it. Otherwise you're just talking, and that's not helping anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, I'm losing the train of thought. I had something amazing I was going to layer onto that, but evidently you didn't need it. So we'll just go with your mic drop moment there. But, I know what it was.
Yeah.
I think for folks maybe that share similar personalities, I'll see that social media post, or I'll hear that friend say that thing, right? Which is like, oh, I wish I could fill in the blank. It's like,
it drives me nuts.
Come on, bro. Just do it. You could do it. And so it's really to be careful, I think, because that can come off very judgmental, right? There's empathy to be given there for somebody that wants something that they don't know how to get, right?
Yeah.
So you could be encouraging or judgmental, or some mixture of both. I don't know.
Yeah. I tend to lean on the harsh side a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It comes from a place of love, but it's like I said, like and it also doesn't have to work out. You can just try it. And if it doesn't, at least you can say you tried.
Right. And I think that's the fear of failure that drives so many people, and even me from time to time. And I'm sure you at points as well, right? So hopefully it doesn't define you.
Yeah.
But that fear of failure can harness us and freeze us and prevent us from doing something. I was saying last night on the phone, I don't think I'll ever get to a place where I spend my last dollar and I become homeless.
Right.
And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I just think I'll figure out a different, and by I'll figure it out, I think the Lord will give me inspiration to try something different, or he'll lead me somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Or, like I was saying, you just, if you're moving, then something can get put in your path, an opportunity, a connection, whatever. And I agree. I think that, obviously living, a faith-based life helps probably with that mindset for sure. Cause I think like, if I'm just doing what I need to do, like the opportunities will come, like you said, the Lord will provide. And I feel that way too. I've never had a fear of like, we're going to be homeless, or like, whatever. I don't know.
It could happen.
It could for sure. And I don't, same, like I'm not saying that in like a cocky way. And I'm definitely not saying that because I'm like so well off that it could never happen.
No,
I'm just saying it from a perspective of like, if we ever got to a point where it was that bad, I'd figure something else out. I'd create an opportunity. We've done it so many times, and the Lord's opened those doors and, put those people in my path or whatever. But I do think it's important that like, it's also backed by action, where it's like, you can't do nothing and then say the Lord's not providing,
100%.
Like you have to be moving. That's like one of the biggest things that happened this year for me. Cause this time last year I was in a really bad spot. Both like mentally and with business and everything, didn't really know where I was going. And in January of this year, I kind of gotten a, not in like a foo-foo weird way, but I had gotten kind of a vision from God of what I needed to do and what this year was going to look like. And so the week after that, I was at our church's Tuesday morning men's prayer. They hold a men's prayer every Tuesday at 5:30 a.m. and it's a great group of guys. But I was there's like 15, 20 minutes of personal prayer time that you do. And I just remember praying like, I'd gotten this vision and I'm like, God, just guide my steps. I kept saying that. And I felt and heard God say like, what steps? Like, you're not moving. I can't guide anything. You're not like, you're asking me to guide your steps. And create this harvest, but like you're not doing anything. Like you have to move for your steps to be guided, And I think that that's where like there tends to be a bigger like differentiator for some people is because it's like, everybody's waiting for this opportunity or this break or this whatever, but then it's like you're just sitting there, like you're not doing anything. So how is anything supposed to happen? And whether you believe it's God or whatever else, applies to your personal belief. Like for me, like I said, it's God and the opportunities that are provided. But regardless of what you believe, if you're just sitting around, nothing can happen,
Pretty unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe it could, but it's rare. Yeah. So yeah.
That's good. We're going to end up with episode 2 and 3, I hope.
Yeah.
So somehow let's get to where, because we're sitting today in Boise, Idaho, and you're not still living in Bend.
Right.
So let's maybe unpack that story just a little bit.
Yeah. I'll try to condense it as much as possible.
Hey, whatever.
Because it's kind of a crazy story. Could probably do an hour just on that. But
maybe we will.
Yeah. But yeah, so we were living in Bend, fast forward 4 or 5 years from, having the coaching job at the brokerage and whatnot. And real estate had been good, but in 2021, it would have been end of 2021, I had the year that I always dreamed of in real estate. Like when I got into it and I had told my wife, like, this is what's going to be like. And, the checks are going to be like this and the deals are going to be flowing and whatever. I'd had that year in 2021 and I got to the end of it and was talking to kind of one of my business mentors that December. And I'm like, I feel nothing, like no motivation to go out and, double your goals or do it again even or anything. Like I just felt completely empty. So I got out of real estate at the end of 2021 and got a job, making $18 an hour as a laborer for one of the commercial contractors in town.
That's a pivot.
And I was literally showing up to work at 7 a.m. and we were building several tens of thousands square foot warehouse for a company in Oregon. And my job was literally start at one corner of the warehouse, sweep everything up behind the subs, pick it up, whatever. And then if you get to the other corner, go back and do it again. And that was all day. And I was getting paid $18 an hour after coming off the best year of my life and convincing myself and my wife that it was somehow good for me. Because I don't know. I didn't feel any excitement around real estate anymore. And so that led to some year, like 2 years or I guess a year of kind of struggle for us. Both financially and then just personally, I got to a point where I was just like I said, just kind of lying to myself saying like, oh, this is good for me. And I had actually transitioned from the commercial contractor over to a custom home builder and I was framing and siding houses, which was a little more rewarding. It felt like I was at least doing labor, like I was actually building something. And at the end of the day, we could be like, oh, we put up those walls or we did this or did that. And so for me mentally, I was like, okay, I could do it. And then I got in a really bad car accident December of 2022. I had gotten off the job and there was a snowstorm and our kind of routine at that time, because I'd gotten out of real estate, my wife had to go back to work. And our routine at that time was I'd get off at like 3:30 or 4. She was driving into town. And so I'd meet her at one of the off ramps, get the kids and drive back home because we were living about 30 minutes outside of town at the time. And so I had met her, grabbed the kids. She was going to go into work till like 8 or 9 that night and then come home. But there had been a really bad snowstorm. And as we were driving home, we hit ice and slid into oncoming traffic and ended up getting in a head-on collision with, fortunately, unfortunately, I guess, but with a small sedan. And I was in a big truck at the time, a Tundra. But we had missed a large like box van by about a split second.
Jeez.
And all the kids were okay, relatively. My son was in the front seat. He had a concussion from the airbag. And my oldest daughter had a small fracture in her wrist from bracing herself over the car seat because my youngest son was in the car seat. But that was a really eye-opening moment, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But for me, it was growing up, my dad used to say, when God wants to get your attention, some people he only has to tap on the shoulder and other people he has to hit in the head with a brick. And that was me getting hit in the head with a brick, I think. It was kind of a wake-up call. And I just remember like I'm sitting in on the highway. It's snowing. Like I had already made sure all the kids were okay, for the most part. And they're obviously stressed. And I have to call my wife and tell her, hey, you need to turn around. And, she's sitting, it's a 2-lane highway. So she's sitting in the traffic that our accident caused to try to get back to the kids. And so she gets the kids. She only had 4 seats in her car, plus her. So 5 seats. So she takes all the kids to the urgent care. And I end up riding home with a cop. They took me home just to, because there was no way for me to get home. And so my wife and kids are at the urgent care, and I'm just sitting in like a dark house by myself after this accident. And I'm just like, in that moment, it was everything, like opposite of everything I was supposed to be as a dad. Like I was fully out of control. I'd put my kids in danger. I'd caused like a tremendous amount of stress on my wife. And like, it happened. Like we hit ice. It wasn't like I was driving recklessly or anything, so it's not like it was something that I directly did, but like at that time, like, in my head, I was like, this was just completely opposite of everything I was supposed to be as a husband and a dad. And so it hit me really hard and caused me to just kind of do a lot of kind of searching of myself and brought up a lot of emotions and things like that. And so too late. But long story short, we have some mentors down in San Diego that she had reached out probably a few weeks later and said, hey, there's this men's conference in San Diego. You need to get to it. And she's always been the person in my life, her and her husband, that it's just kind of when they say something, you just kind of do it, like trust that it's,
I get it.
We always joke around, like when we were really young in our marriage, like, we'd be, having a fight or, whatever going, not talking for a few days. And she'd always reach out and be like in a group text and be like, hey, how's everything going? Like, and I'm just like, what's going on? Why like for no reason, other than just she knew. Yeah. So anyway, so I went down to the men's conference and it was with Awaken Church. And basically the whole theme of or not the whole theme, but like a big topic during that week at the men's conference was how they were planting a campus in Boise. And prior to me going to the conference, I'd gone to lunch with my wife and we had talked about maybe it's time to move back to Southern California. And maybe, we'd even said like, maybe we move to San Diego and get plugged in with the church community down there. And, we were just kind of in like this, wandering phase, like we didn't really know where we wanted to be or what we were doing. I still wasn't back in real estate and things weren't really bad for us in Oregon, but they weren't going good. We had kind of detached with most of our community there. And so we were just kind of like, what's next? Like almost, kind of similar. It sounds like to how you guys might have been, maybe not as dramatic in terms of like things going wrong, but just like, we were just kind of in a spot where there's not much more for us here.
Sure.
And we don't really have any like ties or connections to stay there necessarily. So yeah, I went to that conference and basically came back home and told my wife like, hey, I think Boise might be where we need to end up. And we had been here before. My grandpa's lived here my whole life. So we had visited, we had come, I grew up coming here, not a ton, but a handful of times while I was growing up. I'd come up and play golf with my grandpa. And we had come over here maybe the year or two after we moved to Bend for, there was a family's like 80th birthday. And all I remember from that trip really was when we came over here, we had, gone downtown and hung out and whatever. And on the way back, my wife was like, if we would have visited Boise before we moved to Bend, we would have moved there. And I was like, I could see that, and at the time we were like, things were good in Oregon. So we're like, it is what it is, but that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So I came home and was like, I think we need to, seriously look into Boise. And so we came over and, that was pretty much it. We, had kind of decided without saying it that that's what we were going to do. But I think both of us were kind of like, we'll see, see how it works out. And just a bunch of things lined up for it to make sense. Down from like when we were looking at houses online, my wife had found this community and she's like, if we could get a house in here, like I'll move tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we came over and like there was one house that was, not done. We put in an application, got it, there was some opportunity that opened up with the kids' schools. That was just pretty incredible story. And so yeah, we just decided June, it would have been July of 2023 to move over. And then we did. And that was it. And there was really nothing like, obviously, to be a part of the church community. And, there was several, kind of smaller deciding factors, but it was mostly just time for a change. And, we liked it here. that was pretty much it. There wasn't anything that was like, we have to be there, or no, like we visited and fell in love or anything like that. It was just kind of made sense.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So kind of had a bit of a rock bottom kind of moment in December of 22.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, I don't know, set the course for something different.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course, circumstances led you to Awaken Church, and then feeling your heart's drawn here, and here we are. So I don't want to at all gloss over or fast forward the detail that maybe we didn't capture, but I think for the sake of our conversation today, maybe we kind of end it there and leave a little bit of a cliffhanger for when we pick it up next time for folks to be able to kind of dig in more to maybe some of that story that led to the transition out of Bend into here. But if folks, I mean, the whole point of this, right, is to introduce you to people that either think they know you or people that don't know you at all, right? And then in a perfect world, the best people to do business with, the best way to do business is with people that we know, we like, and trust. Yeah. And so ideally, this conversation has helped people think that they know you and that they like you, right? Hopefully. And then it's like, well, shoot, if I can get in touch with Tanner, maybe he's trustworthy. Maybe he's a guy that I want to work with. So what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you? Yeah, I'm super available. So my Instagram is just my name, Tanner Helm. Yeah. I mean, that has all my contact information on it, but I always tell everybody, like, text, call, email, direct message. I'll get it. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm always on stuff. So cool. So that'll be on the screen down here below. And perfect. And I can attest to that. Yeah. You and I interact on Instagram quite a bit. That's awesome. Yeah. So dude, I really, really appreciate you jumping on here and sharing your story with us. Yeah. I think there's a lot more to unpack, and it's an incredible story of what God's done in your life from a super early age. I think it's awesome to look back and see the credit that can go to your dad. Yeah. And some of the early influences and how that has, I think, shaped you really to this point. So I really, really appreciate you jumping on here and sharing story with us. Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was a blast. Awesome.